I can go first. So I'm called Banji, as we all know at this point. And I guess I identify as an archivist and an archivist. And both those words are portmanteaus between art and archiving and art and activism. And most of the work, or all of the work I do, is usually based on my personal experiences, which occur at like the different identity intersections that happen in my life. So as a Black woman, and on top of that, there's this environmentalist, this African Zambian, so many layers. And I think everything I do, because I use art as a way to express, is always a part of something I'm feeling or experiencing. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Would anyone like to go next?
Shall I go next, ladies? Okay, I'll go next if that's okay. I'm Carol. I'm one of the co-founders at Tiwani Heritage, which is the very first and only Black-owned hair extensions company which recycles premium synthetic hair. My colleague, who unfortunately was unable to join this call, we launched the business in May during the peak of the pandemic, and so far so good. It's been really, really great in terms of building the brand awareness and getting the message out there for Black women in particular to recycle their synthetic hair. We've literally just rolled out the opt-in recycling scheme, where you can now not only recycle our brand, but you can recycle any hair. So if you've got your expression hair sitting down somewhere or any bag of hair lying around, do purchase one of our recycling compostable bags and return it back to us, and we literally melt it down and make it into something else. So I'm also a mom to a 10-month-old little girl, and yeah, and live in London. So that's me in a nutshell.
I'll go next. Hi, my name's Anicia. I am a screenwriter and actor based in New York City. I also have a collective called Black Power Punk Girls that's dedicated to showcasing Black women in music and film. And we have live shows, and we do a bunch of different events and activities. And yeah, that's a little bit about myself. I'm from South Florida, and I'm in New York now.
I go next, Kanekalon. I actually don't know how Zoom meetings work. This is okay, do I just speak? Okay, my name is Kanekalon. I'm from Johannesburg, and I'm interested in like a few things like cooking and like arts, drama, but I've also sort of shifted into like the archiving, like learning about that and learning about like community outreach stuff and more like environmental stuff, sustainable living and like food sovereignty and stuff. So like yeah, so that's sort of what I'm doing. Yeah, I'm in Johannesburg. Yeah.
I'll go next. So I'm Emma. I'm a multidisciplinary arts producer, so I work across photography, film, and words, and graphics, and all sorts of events. I'm also a non-exec director for Horizon Arts Agency, and the former lifestyle assistant editor for Gowdem. I definitely try and challenge approaches to inclusion and innovation in both the corporate and like grassroots spaces I kind of navigate often, predominantly trying to give visibility to and engage those from marginalised groups. So whilst I was living in Germany, I've gone over to a year ago, I was the global creative direction and design intern for Puma as well. So yeah, I'm super interested in regards to sustainability. I spent a whole last year been researching about green and circular economy systems, and kind of similar to what Carol does, the whole project was about kind of repurposing waste fibres and waste materials into new functioning materials and substances. So yeah, I'm really like this, and a black woman, use extensions all the time, do my hair all the time. So to much like of the angst of my life, I feel like it's quite interesting to have this conversation now, because I have spent a big portion of my life kind of having to go through this journey where I now love my hair and care for my hair and how to look after it. So yeah, I'm excited to be here.
I'll go next. My name is Noktula Maguza, but everyone calls me Noxie. I am a theatre maker who specializes mainly in physical theatre and writing. And I focus a lot of my work on bringing out the dangers in society that happen in our everyday lives, using everyday objects and symbols and metaphors that we see every day, so it's closer to home. The environment has always been a big part of my life, and so being part of this conversation has always been quite important to me, just to archive this moment where not only are we loving our hair, but we're loving our environment. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
I guess.
Okay, I'll go next.
Oh.
Okay, so I'm Nicole. I work in the security industry, so you wonder how I got here. But I'm very interested in sort of like community, like sustainability and, you know, sort of recycling at the moment, because I'm from Nairobi. At the moment, I live in Nairobi, and there's no recycling in terms of paper, plastic, nothing. And so a couple of people in sort of the area I live, we're getting into looking into how we can recycle, you know, just basic everyday stuff and stuff like that. And I guess that's how I sort of got into this, how we recycle our hair. Because, for example, I mean, everyone, you know, around where I live, we just all wear braids, and every day, in fact, at the moment, like 8 people in my house have braids on, and all we do is just take them out, throw them, and never think about it again. So I thought this was such an interesting thing to get involved in, because we never think of the aftermath of something like your hair. So what about other things, you know? And yeah, so Nicole, nice to meet everyone. Oh, it's nice to meet you too, Kimberly.
Wait, should I go? So my name is Artis. I am based in Washington, D.C. I'm a visual artist, and my work focuses on empowering and encouraging women to go inward and reevaluate their values, pretty much embrace their hair. And I got into this. I mean, I was curious about this because I work with hair and I create art pieces with Kanekalon hair, and I guess it's a form of recycling, but I never thought of recycling the hair that I put, you know, in my actual scalp. So yeah, that's me.
Should I go? I'm gonna go. Hi, I'm Talani, but everyone calls me Lani. I live in Manchester, which is in the north of England, but originally I'm from like up north, like in the northeast. I am a multidisciplinary artist. I work in sculpture, film. I've started doing textiles work at the moment. Yeah, and I'm just quite interested in kind of what happens to hair after, you know, it comes out of my head, because like I kind of do my hair quite often, so it's kind of like I'm quite conscious about the amount that is kind of like getting thrown away. But yeah, that's why I'm here.
Okay, so I think that's everyone. Kimberly, do you want to maybe type up a little paragraph in the chat, and then I can read it out for you? Reba in. Oh yeah, and Reba's joining again. We'll let her introduce herself as well. Okay, Reba, so we're doing introductions. Do you like to... No. Well, that's okay, Angel. Would you like to let everyone know who you are and what the story is?
Hi, my name's Reba Bristol, living in Edinburgh at the moment, working various freelance things, doing writing, film programming, and event producing, all kind of in the realm of like film. Yeah, I've worked on science fiction films, films about archives, and especially Bristol's kind of archive history, which I'm really interested in. Yeah, I'm just here to chat about hair and the environment. I'm so rubbish at doing these. Making dinner, that's why I'm just bopping around as well, sorry. Someone in Edinburgh was giving out free plant and ended racism, so I'm quite happy here.
Charity, would you like to introduce yourself? Can you hear us? Yeah, I think she might be frozen. Okay, so I think maybe we should get started because, as I said, we've got a limited time cap and we want to get to the fleshy bit of the conversation. So as I explained before, I've set a few questions as a guideline, but this is an open conversation, so we can veer off. But if we veer off too much, I'll just try and bring us back a little bit, but open conversation. And I think the first question, everyone's mostly elaborated on it during their introductions, but I will ask it again just in case there's a bit more space to reiterate. And that is, why did you feel compelled to be a part of this project? Like, what was it that drew you in? And everyone can speak at whatever points they need. No need to raise hands or anything weird and institutional.
I had gone to an art showing called Quaff at a gallery close by, I can't recall, and they were doing like a whole bunch of stuff on hair. So I was already sort of like in the space where I was thinking more about hair. I've been thinking more about my own hair, and I'm always playing with my hair and changing up. And I recently started living with someone who actually like reuses her hair. So she puts braids in and she keeps them for a short while. She takes them out, she cleans it. And she also started getting into crochet because of that, because she wanted to reuse the hair and not always be throwing away her hair. So like when I saw this also like felt like it made sense, like to learn more about that, and it's like super interesting.
Thank you.
So,
I guess also to kind of add to that too, like I've always grown up with my hair being like a quite contentious thing for me, and so it's literally in the last like, oh god, I guess like, in my head it's like last year, but really it's been like a 6-7 year journey of getting my natural hair a lot better. And I think with that comes from being a working class person and how expensive like good hair can be. I think that for me was kind of what got me into like trying to make sure I looked after my extensions and like reusing them, actually finding like trying to have a more ethical relationship with them that way. Still not really doing anything in terms of like, end of the day, you still, after how many times you've used it, you still end up chucking it away, and that's kind of been the pattern I've been in. But it's still like that element of like thinking more consciously about like, I'm not gonna just chuck it away after one use. And I think that comes from being like poor as fuck. So I think that's kind of had a lot of an influence with regards to like my relationship with my extensions and like using them ethically or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, just to add, I think it's quite interesting, and this is often a topic that comes up a little bit further into the Kanekalon conversations, but we've found that in chatting, there's often a link between, I guess, a more sustainable lifestyle that often isn't intentional, but you're doing it just because of the simplicity or like economic bounds. And it's quite interesting because like there's this like a social theory where when you climb up the social ladder, you have more time to think about like world problems and issues because you're not concerned about those things. But there's almost like a counter, because when people climb up this social ladder, they, I guess, become more hyper consumerist, and they completely ignore and sideline this simple lifestyle or a lifestyle of reusing or upcycling. And I think it's quite interesting, that little link. But as I said, it'll probably come up a little bit later in the chat. But I just thought it would be good to caveat that with that. But yeah, back to the little question.
I think there's also like a link between like what I've kind of seen in the UK anyway, is like there's kind of like quite a classist bubble that like surrounds like environmentalism at the same time, whereas like it's kind of only, I don't know, like a lot of kind of eco-friendly products are way more than like, you know, say like a basic line at a supermarket, and it's like it's not that accessible to a lot of people, yet the like, you know, like working class people or people in like lower pay brackets are always the ones that get like the brunt of like these kind of rich eco people like shouting at them, being like, oh, you should like, you know, why aren't you recycling more, like like why aren't you buying eco products? And it's like, I think in a sense it's quite inaccessible to a lot of people, so a lot of people don't feel like, you know, they could be as eco-friendly as they wanted to be, because it's kind of like there's this big expensive like wall in front of them. Yeah,
completely agree.
Completely as well. And it is quite interesting, as you said, how it's a bit of a classist bubble. And every time I think about the topic of environmentalism in the UK, I always think about like Extinction Rebellion. And good for them, they're doing good things. But if you look at like the demographics of that group, it's mainly upper class white people. And as you say, Lani, there's this war, and they're always, I guess, shouting at the people who don't have as much access to maybe information as much as the physical resources. And there is just this massive marginalization. And I think that's another problem, is that in certain bubbles of social progressiveness, you know, whether that's environmentalism or feminism or any of the isms, people forget that not everyone is as privileged as them to have access. So I think that's another reason I wanted to initiate these conversations as like a learning platform, an open learning platform to share with other people, you know, because we're having this conversation at, I guess, different levels and at different intersections, and not many people are having this conversation. You can learn a lot from just listening to people, you know. So yeah, that's my little ramble.
Hey, on that note as well. Hello?
Hey.
Yes, so I was saying, what you're talking about is exactly why I joined the conversation in the first place. We have that in Zambia, where we have like 5 or 6 or 7 climate change ambassadors, and they've been doing the same thing over and over again. So I felt like I'd want to learn more in this regard and see if I can use it in other regards as well. If I learn, say, how to recycle hair, maybe I would learn or be more interested in recycling bottles to start with, and teaching the lower class people, because it's very elitist even back home here in Zambia. And it's a very good conversation, and I would hope that these would be curated and be given a wider audience so that many people can get access to them, and we could make it a progressive conversation.
Absolutely. Also, just a little warning, I've gotten the little bubble that says we only have about 10 minutes left. So what I'll do is I will send a new link to a new meeting, and then we can go from there. But in the meantime, I think let's just chat until we get cut off and then restart. But yeah, anybody else like to add what drew them to this project in particular?
I think I'd like to, you know, just add on to Charity's point. It's like the same thing I was saying earlier about how, you know, we have no access to recycling or upcycling or anything of the sort here. And, you know, that's why I'm struggling to find somewhere that even recycles, you know, bottles. So that's why when I even heard about hair, I was like, there's more stuff to recycle, you know, and there's still no places that I know of to start with the things that I already know. And like hair, for example, like honestly, you cannot walk around here without seeing braids, weave, or whatever, and they're just always in bins and everything. So like, it's good to talk about these things, because like knowledge is power, and at the, like, you know, from the bottom line, like people don't even know that you need to do these things, you know.
Exactly.
And I think you said that absolutely, you hit the nail on the head there, Nicola. For us as a business, we did a few focus groups to sort of really understand what was important to women of colour, in particular Black women here in the UK. And we put the question to them, is recycling important to you? And to our surprise, a lot of the answer was no. And so it begged the question as to, do Black people care? Do Black people care enough to sort of look at the environment and be sustainable? And if not, why is that the case? And this leads perfectly into what Emma and Lani said. A lot of it is to do with social class. If you do not have the access or the money to even be able to sort of, you know, look beyond what's in front of you, then nothing else really matters, because you're just sort of existing for survival. And we wanted to change that. We wanted to sort of give Black women in particular the means to be able to think bigger than just themselves. And our hair is a part of, you know, who we are. It's what, you know, defines us. It's what, you know, sort of collaborates us. And so we are the biggest consumers of hair products, in particular synthetic hair. So why not start having this conversation? And it's so refreshing for me sitting here listening to you, you know, you guys, and telling us your thoughts and being, you know, conscious about these things. Because as I tell you, in our focus group, that wasn't really the attitude. It wasn't until we launched, that's when we started to get people saying, oh my goodness, this is amazing. You can actually recycle, you know, hair extensions. I did not know that my hair extensions were made of these polymers. So yeah, and that's why I wanted to be in this space, to sort of meet like-minded women like yourselves who are, you know, who are conscious about these things, because I think it's really an educational piece for us to have this conversation and bring it to the forefront for our community to be aware. So yeah.
And I agree, because in a way, even though there's a massive gap in this interest in recycling and the environment, often when environmental disasters hit, marginalized communities like Black or Indigenous groups often are affected first. Like, I mean, a lot of the climate change issues we're going through now are as a result of industrial revolutions years ago, you know, but you don't see like massive cyclones sweeping across the Western world. It's happening in Africa, Mozambique, Malawi, places like that. So I think there's a need for us to kind of shift into gear and realize that this affects us and our communities in ways, and we have to center ourselves as, I guess, the heroes in the story, because there's often this narrative that's often like, oh yeah, environmentalism is for white people, etc. And they're the ones who are meant to be the conveyors or the tellers of this story. But I think there's a need to take on the role of the protagonist in this environmental story, because we need to like take charge of our collective futures, you know. So I think that was just something to add and something to think about in terms of, I guess, the wider impact of climate change. Yeah. Would anyone like to add to this question, or should we move on to the second one? I know it plays in.
I'll add to it. I would just say that when I've been wearing like hair extensions since I was like in elementary school, so I was very young. My mom always like had me trying different braiding styles, and just like my relationship with hair weaves and like hair has been so complicated over the years, but it's been so much a part of my life. But I never considered I just never considered what happens after it came out of my head. And I know that I've used a lot of hair weaves, so just learning more about this project and even coming across it through Lung's project, I was like, this is something I would really like to learn more about so I can be more informed and help make a difference with people in my community, making them aware, because I don't, like, a lot of people I know aren't aware of what, I don't think we're thinking about what's happening afterwards. So I think this is an important conversation to have. And yeah.
Exactly, and that leads quite nicely into my next question, which everyone has touched on in a way, and that was, have you ever considered hair an environmental pollutant? Because as Nicole said, there are certain items or materials that we do consider pollutants before certain things. And I think with hair as well, it wasn't until recently that I actually sat down and Googled what is Kanekalon made out of. And it's entirely microplastics, you know? And I think this is something that a lot of people aren't aware of. And as Anisha said, because our hair is so heavily intertwined into like the base of our identities, it's not something that we question very often. It's just something that is. Like even for me, I've always been interested in the environment, and I've been doing different means of environmental, I guess. I've had different means of environmental involvement, but with hair, because I was so far removed from the fact that it was an environmental pollutant, it's taken me so much of a longer time to realize. And you know, that's the thing, when something is almost super close to your heart, the rationality of it sometimes is a little bit blurred, which is another reason I wanted to instate this project, because it's a question of, I guess, reshaping or remolding such an integral part of our identity as Black women, and rethinking it and remodulating it and seeing how we can retain this as a building block of our identity, but just make it more sustainable. So yeah, it's basically at what point in your natural hair journey or hair journey, environmental journey, the intersection of that, realized that braiding fiber was a pollutant.
Unfortunately for me, oh, could I? Oh.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, I was saying, unfortunately for me, it was literally at the beginning of this group. I was like, wait, what? There's an issue with hair now? And I went and started Googling it and, you know, watching YouTube videos, and I was just so upset because I literally change my hair every month and throw my piece out. I never even recycle piece. And I was just like, oh my God, I've been doing zero work with the paper if this is literally what I'm doing, you know, on the other hand, and so on and so forth.
I had moments where when I would see, like, I mean, there's like a lot of parts of New York that's just like trash is everywhere and it's kind of disgusting. But I would notice like pieces of like, you know, like braiding hair, like on the floor, like just kind of rolling around. And like, I would have moments where I'm like, I wonder like where that's going to go, or like, you know, but I didn't really deeply consider it until, just as Nicole said, like this project, hearing about this project and doing further research is when it really occurred to me, like, oh wow, like that probably ended up somewhere that it didn't need to be. And I mean, who knows where it is today? It's just laying around. So so yeah, I had moments, but I never really tried to look into it, and looking into it is what made me realize. So now essentially that's when I learned.
Me too.
Yeah, I was the same as well. Like, had always kind of thought about it, but not actually properly thought about it until I was like added into this group, and I was like, hang on, yeah. But I kind of like, this probably sounds really disgusting, but because I'm an artist, I find it really hard, like, getting rid of things. So like, in my loft right now, I've literally got like a duffel bag, like a big bag full of like more or less all the braids I've ever, like all the old hair, just in like sandwich bags, dated. And I know that sounds horrible, but like something in my brain was like, what if I need these for a project or like whatever? Because like for a long period of time, like my practice was kind of based around hair. So I was like, well, if I keep these, like, you know, I might need them for something. But now I guess I can just recycle them.
There we go.
Yeah. But then also like I would kind of like I'd love to kind of like try and think of a way to like reuse them again as well. But yeah, so like I've just got like a big old bag in my loft that's just full of old hair. I don't dare like open any of like the sandwich bag. It probably absolutely stinks. But like it's just nice to look at as well, because like every time I change my hair like to either like a new style or colour, I'll take a photo of it as well. So I've got like a big collection of like all my different hair, because before I started getting braids, I used to like dye it a lot. I only really started braiding my hair when I came to uni in 2014, because it's predominantly quite white in Newcastle, even though like there is like small like pockets of like black communities and stuff. Being mixed race, I kind of didn't feel like, I don't know, like my dad took me to a salon when I was like little to get cornrows, and like I just had like such a traumatic experience, and I felt really weird because it's like, you know, like I don't feel like I belong here and all this stuff. So like I kind of didn't really go to get my hair done until I came to uni, where there's like predominantly a lot more black hair shops and a slightly bigger black population here in Manchester, whereas like in comparison to Newcastle, it's like they're quite small pockets, and like all my friends were white, so like I didn't really think about that. Like the older I've got, the more I'm gonna like try to like reclaim my blackness in a way. Yeah, it's just kind of like.
Sorry, I just have a question and carry on. I was going to ask earlier about how you do your own hair. Do you reckon that's informed a lot of like you feeling like I've just got to figure out myself? You said that much from how like, you do your own styles and stuff.
Yeah, like
that's interesting. So, that's just like interesting.
Yeah, like when I moved to Manchester, I went to a salon and like I just got completely ripped off. Like I think because she saw me and was like, "You do not know what you want or what you're doing here," so she like, ripped me off to fuck. And then
salons are actually teeth. Salons in the UK are actually really teeth.
I mean, what I mean, and like I was talking to my mates and they were like, "Why the fuck did you pay that much money for like box braid?" And I was like, "Well, I did not know." And then I found someone on Gumtree and she was super. And then my friend, she moved to London. She like graduated, moved, and that's when I found Banji. And then Banji became my hair hun. Yeah. And then she did it, so she moved away.
Yeah, hair thing, like in England, coming from Zambia or anywhere, I think in Africa, because the accessibility to hair braiders and hair salons is a lot wider, you pay a lot less. Like I wasn't about to pay £70 for some hair. So I had to start learning how to braid my own hair. And then I thought, listen, a lot of other Black women are probably going through this process of not having access to cheap hair braiders because their students are like, you know what, why not make an extra buck? And I did it, and it was a good way to bond. I mean, Lani and I would spend, like 7 hours together, you know? And I think that's another beautiful thing about Black hair, is because it takes a lot of our time, it almost becomes like a ritualistic process. Like even when you're doing it with someone, it's just got that like that specialness to it, you know? It's not like get into the shower, wash it in 5 minutes and get out again. No, spend the time. Which is
like we would spend hours. Like, do you remember that time it took like 11 hours to do those tiny little blonde braids?
Yes, I remember. I remember that for sure. But then the follow-up question, to just because we will probably veer off and keep talking about hours for a long time. When you guys realized that hair was an environmental pollutant, did that immediately change your braiding habits, or did you keep trying to find, I guess, excuses to carry on as normal?
The stuff I've gotten in the moment is the first time I've like put hair back into my hair. But I think it's to do with like the texture, because this is like kinky like Marley hair, whereas with like straighter braiding hair, I feel like it's a lot harder to kind of like keep it together after you've taken it out.
That's true.
But like I do genuinely think about it more now that I'm aware of like obviously where it's going. Yeah.
Yeah, same. I feel like I consciously, like with most things, you kind of figure out, oh, that's really bad for you. Like, you have that guilt regardless, like, on your mind. And I think that's something I'm more conscious of. I literally just did my hair, like, recently quite a few different times. And I think for me, it's been, like, that reusing part has been the focus, because I haven't really had or been made aware of, like, opportunities to actually recycle it in the same way. And to actually now knowing, Carol, you're going to be my link. I'm sorry, but I'm going to absolutely using your services, because now you know you've got that. Like, do you mean it's like not knowing that's an option, really, truly, and actually when you know it's there, it's like, well, why wouldn't I use that? Do you know what I mean? So like, I think when you get given the opportunity to, it's like great, but actually when you don't know, you're not presented with an actual solution to your problem, it's easy to kind of carry on with that cycle.
Exactly.
Hey, so on my end, I'm becoming a little more conscious than I used to be. I still have a long way to go. I'm making a lot of excuses still. I have synthetic hair again. But I think the key is the awareness. And like I said earlier, it's good that these conversations are being had, because if we did not have this, I wouldn't even have space to feel guilty about it. So now even when you're going to use hair products, be it for synthetic hair or natural hair, you're more obliged to use companies that have products that kind of add back to the environment. Maybe I'd rather use, let's say, a hairspray that is made by an organic company, for example, an organic hair making company. So things like that. It's slow and gradual, but the conversation is being had, and that's a good start.
I agree. And I mean, with something like this, because, as I said, it's such an integral building block of our identities, and it's something that we've grown up with and been socialized to do, is not going to change in a heartbeat. It's an unlearning process, which is an arc, and it takes a while. So I mean, guilt is like, I don't know if guilt is a progressive emotion. You know, it's something that everybody feels all the time. But I think it's better to feel, I guess, a sense of accountability or responsibility than it is to feel guilt. Because I think, as Charity said, even just being aware of it is something that a lot of other Black women haven't accessed yet. So the fact that we're here talking about it is like a massive pat on the back to us. So yeah, I'm glad that we're all here, critically thinking about the spaces in which we exist as Black women and the impacts that has on our communities. Oh yes, so at the beginning of the project, I sent a link to a resource list. I compiled a bunch of links and videos. Did you guys get the chance to watch any of those?
I watched a few, yeah.
Yeah.
That was so long ago now, I think about it. Oh my God, like July.
I was actually thinking about resending it earlier today, but I'll resend it again, and we could...
They were really interesting though. I really enjoyed actually looking for them.
They were quite good. I mean, there was one that really stood out to me, and it was a recycled hair market in Kenya. So essentially, this woman or this entrepreneur from a low income background basically goes to landfills and collects hair that people chuck, and she cleans it and repackages it and takes it to her little shop and braids people's hair using that. And it was quite interesting because when I watched, I was like, oh my gosh, this is really innovative. She's making money out of like things that people have discarded. So extending the life cycle of this material. And I scrolled down to the YouTube comments and people were chatting. Oh, bye, Anisha. Thank you so much for joining. It was a pleasure to have you. But as I was saying, yeah, YouTube comments, people were being absolutely relentless and being like, yeah, this is completely disgusting. Do people know what they're buying? Do they know that they're using hair that's been in a landfill, etc.? And it got me thinking, like, you're so far removed from the issue is why you could critique it with so much like veracity, you know, one. And two, who's to say that like Expression, Kanekalon, Darling, and places like this aren't using similar methods? It's just because it's someone in the middle of Africa, people have something to say, you know. And I thought that was such an interesting dynamic, and yeah, it was quite jarring to just see a lot of people just chat so much cuck, you know.
Oh, bless her. People are wild in YouTube comments though, which is what's so depressing. You can't have a constructive, progressive conversation on YouTube. Like, it's just so difficult.
Exactly. And Carol's just sent a link.
Yeah, so during our research of looking at, you know, ways of recycling synthetic hair, we saw that actually pretty much 96% of used synthetic hair ends up in the landfill, in particular here in the UK. And there was something wrong with that picture, obviously, for us, for many reasons. But we asked ourselves the question, why isn't anybody doing this? And why isn't anybody addressing the issue? And partly because, you know, people weren't aware, just like yourself. Some of you have mentioned that you weren't even aware that hair could be environmentally, you know, impactful on you know, onto our planet. So we looked into it and we just thought, actually, let's research and see ways we can do this. And we literally partnered up with a company called TerraCycle. And it wasn't until we spoke to TerraCycle, which is an American recycling firm. I don't know if any of you have heard of them, but their motto is to recycle the unrecyclable. And we literally spoke to them about ways of trying to sort of put together this initiative. And it was very, very simple. It was just a case of, you know, customers or, you know, people who have, you know, used hair extensions, you know, sitting in their loft, for example. Lani, you're sitting there, literally just send it back to us and we literally send it to TerraCycle. And as I mentioned before, they melt it down. But, you know, but we're still producing these plastic fibers, and that, you know, recycling isn't going to solve the problem. So what I've just sent you is a entrepreneur based in Kenya, and she has found this plant called, I think it's pronounced sisal. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yes.
Yeah, sisal, that's it. Sisal fiber, which is a plant basically. And she's found an ingenious way to kind of sort of make that into hair extensions, basically. And you know, she's still getting funding, but it's literally, there's a new wave of, you know, conscious Black entrepreneurs who want to do their bit. And, you know, I sent that to you, Banji, so that you can add that to your list. But it has to go beyond just us talking about it. We have to do something about it. And this is part of the reason why I'm interested in hearing a little bit more. So I'm not going to talk too much. I want to hear from you guys to understand, you know, your thoughts and what you're doing to kind of sort of change that. And, you know, Nicole has just said that there isn't anything where she is. And, you know, what are you going to do to try and sort of get the conversation outside where you are? So yeah, so that's, I just wanted to add that little bit into the conversation to say that we need to stop talking. I know that talking is the initial step, but what are we doing? We need to, you know, put things into action so that we can be progressive and seem to be progressive.
Absolutely. I agree about actionable change with regards to not just recycling, because that won't tackle the issue of the plastic problem, but changing the material. But because of, I guess, the economic system in which we live in, people will always find the easiest way to do things, and that's plastic. So how do you think we would be able to go about, like, to these big Japanese companies, Indian companies, and say there's actually an alternative to using microplastics? And I think that's something that can be done at like a legislative policy making level, because I don't think we can do that as, I guess, citizens or even consumers. There has to be like a certain governmental initiative, which I think is totally doable, you know, through, I guess, civil groups, etc. But this is also something that's much bigger than just us as consumers. So I guess the bigger question is, how do we not just have these conversations in our intimate communities, but have them with the people sitting at the top of the hierarchy, you know? But yeah, no, I think the plant extensions are such an amazing idea, because they biodegrade, you know, so everything goes back to the earth, which is super important. I think I did include a similar link to the resource list, which, as I said before, I'll send to you guys again, so you can just have a little bit of a refresher. And then a question which kind of relates to what I said about the main producers of synthetic hair being based in India or mainland China, relates to transparency. You know, there's a massive problem of transparency in these big corporations. So how do you think as consumers we could push these corporate companies that we're buying from to be more transparent? Because I mean, if you go to the Kanekalon website, they don't show you what their fibers are made out of, and they know what they're made out of. But I guess to surpass, I guess, this social palatability, they don't do that. So is it our responsibility as consumers to try and push them to be a bit more transparent? And if so, how do you guys think we do that? Is it through boycotting? Is it through, I don't know, writing letters? Because as Carol said, we need to take this beyond just chatting and have some sort of level of, you know, actionable change. But how? Because I think part of me having these conversations with you guys is the awareness bit, but it's also brainstorming actual solutions, you know? So I'm keen to hear.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead. Who?
Maybe like some form, I know there's just petitions flying around everywhere constantly, but I guess it's kind of a way of like internationally spreading the word about it, if you know, like, because once a petition gets like traction on like a social media site, like the reach it can have. Obviously, I'm not saying that like, you know, these companies particularly might want to read a petition, but you know, there's like quite a few signatures on one, surely they'd have to pay a tiny bit of attention again.
You like to think that, but as a retailer who, you know, who has dealt with some of these manufacturers in China and India, and I can tell you that they're not the most helpful. We've actually moved away from dealing with such manufacturers and have taken our business to Africa itself, mainly in Nigeria, and working with Nigerian suppliers. So give you an example, Darling Hair actually have their own factory in Lagos, and they manufacture their own brand. And that they're just one of very few Black-owned factories, and even they don't sort of let you know what's in it. So we took it upon ourselves to do a bit more digging, a bit more research. And you've got different types of quality, as you know, with these products. So you've got, you know, the basic form, which is acrylic, which is the one that you can't really apply heat to. It's very stiff, very shiny, and it looks like plastic. And they're the cheapest form of synthetic hair you can get. And I think you can only probably use it once, maybe twice if you're lucky. Then you can go up the chain and get more higher grade type of synthetic hair, where you use monoacrylics, which is more moldable. You can apply a little bit of heat to that, and it's more, you know, longer lasting and durable. But there is one product, there's one item that actually sort of is put onto many of these synthetic hair, which is vinyl chloride. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. And I think that is where the transparency is lacking. They don't want to let you know that this is the chemical coating that they put on these synthetic hair. I'll let you sort of do your own little research. There are some companies that claim not to use them, but I'm very doubtful of that, because you do kind of sort of need it to sort of bind the materials together to make the hair. But I think once you have transparency with your retailers, such as Tiwani Heritage, we pride ourselves on telling you the truth, and you know exactly what you're buying, you know exactly what's in it. And we try to sort of speak to, you know, these manufacturers to try and be a bit, you know, a bit more forthright and a bit more open, but they pretend that they don't really know what's in it. So it is a case of, you know, how the vegan movement has just sort of swept the world. You start small and you start building and you start building. Now every business or every restaurateur or any sort of food outlet, supermarkets now include vegan menus and vegan safe options. And I think it starts like that. You have to keep drumming the beat, making the noise before they start to make those changes. We're far away from that, but I think collectively we start small. Businesses like myself who are literally telling you what's in the hair, and you make the choice, you make the decision whether or not you want to sort of move forward and continue to use plastic fibers in your hair, which I think is not a bad thing, because, you know, we like to change our hair. But there are some who prefer the human hair route, which is also a little bit dubious. So there's really no win-win situation. But I think as a consumer, you have to decide which brand you want to go with and make the judgment call for yourself. But at least you have the understanding and the knowledge to know what you're buying.
Exactly, I agree. So, as you said, as much as it is the responsibility of the manufacturers and the producers, I think putting all of the blame or the accountability on them kind of removes us as consumers. Thank you. From like this point of responsibility and being able to do something. So it's just about, I guess, critically thinking about our decisions and reading a little bit more into things, and not just taking things at face value, because we are living in a system that has so many veneers and facades. And I guess we have the privilege of having access to information via the internet. So almost everything is at the touch of a button. It's just about, I guess, finding ways to be more responsible at an individual level, and that like rippling outwards. Yeah, and on that note, we actually have gone through all the questions that I had on the and I've just gotten the running out of time banner.
Okay, so on that note, what you're talking about, I think it brings us back to this conversation being elitist as well. Because if you're going to say, oh yes, it would be a good thing to your small circles and building up, they also have their own circles with people with information. With the country I come from, like Zambia, if you're going to tell a local everyday consumer about what's in the product or whatever, be it a lotion, they wouldn't know what magnesium is. They wouldn't know what product those are and how they would affect their own hair. So to them, they see hair, they see the color, they like it, they go do it. I feel
And
like the
even
best
sometimes
way.
if they don't care. That's the worst part.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I think one of the ways we could go about this, especially my country or Africa as a whole, is that Africans care about making money. It brings us back to the bottle issue. Most Africans are recycling bottles now because they can make money out of it. So if you're going to bring the policies even to people and whatnot, you need to, for local communities, it would be good if we could restructure it in a way where we show them that money can be made off of this. Then as they make their money, people are becoming conscious and it becomes more localized and less elitist.
Yeah, no, it's true to, I guess, incentivize things like that. And I guess put things, especially something like environmentalism, which is so laden with academic jargon and all these big words like polyvinyl chloride that a lot of people won't understand. I guess we have to, as people who understand things to that degree, be able to restructure it and make it a little bit less complicated to reach the people we're trying to reach, you know. And I guess that's another question. Do we, through policy, get environmental education as something that's part of the school curriculum? But I know the Zambian government is not going to do that. So part of my long
There's the Kenyan one.
No, they're not going to do that. So part of my long-term plan, I guess, is to, I don't know, as an NGO, kind of create an academic curriculum around environmental education and pitch that to schools, because it's a lot easier to learn stuff when you are a lot younger. So yeah, that's another sort of solution I've been thinking about, just boosting.
Well, I'd say that's how like a lot of kids in the UK are so conscious about recycling now, because when I was in primary school, like that's when the kind of like nationwide like recycling thing kind of started, where it's like we all got recycling bins in our homes and all that thing. And like that was really like pushed to us as like primary school kids. And I'd say my generation of like, you know, people around about my age are a bit more conscious about like just general things like recycling than like say older generations, because we were like literally it was like preached to us at primary school, like when that whole kind of thing came in. It was like really kind of like taught to us. So I guess it's kind of like ingrained in a lot of us, like more than like kind of older generations, like my parents or like my grandparents' generation as well.
Exactly. Well, this was such a fruitful talk, and I'm so happy we got to make it to this one. Thank you to everyone that stayed till the end. You're all stars. What I'll do, as I said, is I will send you both the audio and the video files of the recording, and you can check it out. If you do have any like issues, you can let me know before I send it to Lungs for them to publish. But when they do publish it, would you guys like to be tagged? I think in the consent forms, like the credit will be the name that you signed on your consent form. Is that fine for everyone?
Yeah.
And then with the tagging, if you'd like to be, or rather if you don't want your social media to be tagged, let me know. Otherwise, I'll do that. Or Lungs will do that.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. You guys have a lovely evening. It was so joyful to see all of your faces.
Likewise, Banji. Thank you for hosting an eventful conversation, and very well done to you for all the good work you're doing at your end, and you know, bringing us together to have this dialogue. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you guys.
Right, take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.